You may think the Wild West was all gunfights, horses, and dusty saloons. But what if I told you the Rio battle in 1880 was not for land or gold, but for food? Behind every cowboy legend was an empty stomach, a hungry family, and meals so harsh they could break a man's spirit. Tonight, we travel back to discover what people truly ate in the Wild West, and why one simple meal could mean the difference between hope and despair. Stay until the end, because the final story of one starving mother will change how you see history forever. The year was 1880. Across the endless plains of the American frontier, life was hard, dry, and unforgiving. Towns were small, roads were rough, and food was never guaranteed. For settlers, cowboys, miners, and widows trying to raise children alone, every meal was a struggle against nature itself. Morning usually began before sunrise. Families woke inside wooden cabins where the wind slipped through the cracks. The fire from the night before had nearly died, and the smell of ash filled the room. Mothers would kneel beside the stove, hoping there was enough flour left for biscuits. Flour was precious. Sugar was rare. Butter was a luxury many never saw for months. Most breakfasts were plain and repetitive: hard biscuits, salted pork, black coffee, or beans left over from the night before. Cowboys driving cattle for weeks across open land often ate worse. They carried dried beans, bacon, and sourdough starter. The camp cook, known as the chuck wagon boss, was often the most respected man on the trail because hungry cowboys depended on him more than anyone. One such cowboy was Thomas Reed, only 22 years old. He had come west chasing dreams of money and adventure. Instead, he found blisters, loneliness, and meals that barely filled him. Night after night, he sat beside the fire eating beans so tough they cracked between his teeth. "Is this all there is?" he once asked the cook. The old man laughed softly. "Son, in the West, a hot plate of beans is sometimes richer than gold." Thomas didn't understand at first. He dreamed of fancy dinners back east: roast chicken, warm pies, fresh bread. But weeks turned into months, and hunger taught him a lesson pride never could. Food was not about taste. It was about survival. In mining camps, life was no better. Men dug all day underground, breathing dust, then paid high prices for stale bread, dried meat, and watery stew. A fresh apple could cost nearly a day's wage in remote camps because wagons had to travel dangerous roads for supplies. Meanwhile, women on lonely homesteads worked miracles with almost nothing. They stretched flour into dumplings, boiled weeds into soup, and traded eggs for coffee. Many hid their hunger so their children could eat first. One winter evening in Kansas, a widow named Sarah Miller stared into an empty cupboard. Her 2 children sat quietly at the table, pretending not to be hungry. She found one handful of cornmeal and a little lard. That was all. She mixed it with water and made thin cakes on the stove. Burned at the edges, dry in the middle, but to her children, it looked like a feast. As they ate, Sarah smiled though her own stomach ached. In the Wild West, mothers often served love disguised as food. The West was not built by gunslingers alone. It was built by women who made meals from nothing, by cooks who fed tired hands, and by workers who learned gratitude one bite at a time. But harder days were coming. Because when drought struck the frontier, even beans and bread became treasures. The summer of 1880 was cruel. Rain stopped falling across many western lands. Crops withered under the sun. Wells dried. Livestock weakened. Hunger spread quietly, like smoke in the wind. In the small frontier town of Red Creek, shelves emptied fast. Flour sacks became lighter each week. Prices doubled then tripled. Families skipped meals so children could eat once a day. Thomas Reed, now back from the cattle trail, rode into town thin and weary. He expected to find work and food. Instead, he found desperation. Men argued outside the general store. Mothers waited with coins that bought almost nothing. Inside her cabin, Sarah Miller faced the same fear. Her cornmeal was gone. Her children were weaker than before. That night she prayed for help, though she had nothing left to trade. The next morning, church bells rang unexpectedly. People gathered in the dusty square. Old Mr. Callahan, owner of the largest ranch nearby, stood beside several wagons covered with cloth. He removed the cloth, and the crowd gasped. Flour, potatoes, beans, dried apples, salt pork. Months earlier, Callahan had stored supplies for profit, planning to sell high when hunger worsened. But after seeing starving children in town, shame struck his heart harder than greed ever had. "I was rich," he said, voice shaking, "but I was poorer than all of you. Today, we eat together." Some men distrusted him. Others cried openly. But hunger leaves little room for pride. Thomas stepped forward first and helped unload sacks. Soon the whole town joined in. Women lit fires. Men carried water. Children laughed for the first time in weeks. Sarah Miller stood over a giant iron pot stirring stew made from potatoes, beans, and pork. The smell drifted through town like heaven itself. When bowls were passed around, silence fell. People ate slowly, tears mixing with smiles. It was not a feast of kings. It was simple frontier stew. But after so much fear, it tasted like hope. Thomas sat beside Sarah and her children, sharing biscuits fresh from the oven. He realized something then. The richest meal he had ever eaten was not in a city dining hall. It was here, among tired people who chose kindness over selfishness. Red Creek survived that drought because neighbors learned to share. Gardens were planted together. Hunters brought meat for widows. Bakers gave day-old bread freely. Pride faded. Community grew. Years later, when railroads brought easier supplies and towns became cities, old-timers still spoke of the summer hunger came, and the meal that saved them. Because the truth of the Wild West was never only violence or adventure. It was endurance. It was sacrifice. It was mothers feeding children first. It was strangers becoming family over one bowl of stew. And it reminds us today, when times are hardest, even the simplest food can become a miracle when shared with love. Final message. History remembers outlaws and legends, but the real heroes of the Wild West were the hungry people who stayed kind. In every age, survival matters, but compassion is what truly feeds the soul. If today's story touched your heart, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember, even a small act of kindness can change someone's entire life. Red Heart.